Que está aquí rápidamente para presentarles. Tenemos una nueva colega que es una colega del Instituto Geofísico que va a ser, fue seleccionada para hacer una tesis de doctorado. Ay, justo se fue. La Marju, no, ahí está. Sí, perdón. Una nueva colega que fue seleccionada para hacer un doctorado en el tema de ciencia ciudadana, ¿sí? Con Jenny, con Teresa y algunos otros investigadores en East Anglia. Entonces, les saluden, ahí está Marjorie, no sé si te presentas solo rapidísimo para empezar con el seminario.
Sí, claro. ¿Cómo están? Buenos días con todos. Mi nombre es Marjorie Encalada y actualmente trabajo en el Instituto Geofísico y es un placer para mí ser parte de este proyecto y trabajar y colaborar con ustedes en todo lo que sea necesario. Muchas gracias y mucho gusto con todos.
Gracias, Marju. Ok, entonces ahora sí vamos a comenzar este seminario. Esta vez tenemos a Pablo Moreira, que es el presidente del Colegio de Arquitectos del Ecuador, que nos va a hablar sobre un tema bien interesante, que es el reforzamiento de estructuras, ¿no? En algunos barrios de la ciudad de Quito. Como ustedes saben,
formation of structures in different neighborhoods in Quito, and he is one of our strategic partners of the project, and we've had some meetings with them, and they've participated in various meetings in our center, and in the future, we're hoping to have more relation with them. So I'm going to have Pablo, the president of the Association of Architects, talk again about the structural formation. Okay, Pablo, good morning, everyone. Thank you, Danielle. Good evening to others as well. Good afternoon as well. Actually, I'm very interested in this meeting and that we make part of the Architects Association and Felipe Corral as well. And our idea is to show the idea of what the Association of Architects has done for the community with a presentation that's specifically about the reinforcement of structures, which we have began about 6 months ago. And it's been going on for about a year with the conversation with the communities and public institutions. So I'm going to share my screen to begin describing the project. Does everyone see the screen? Yes. So as I said, before beginning with restructuring of buildings, I'm going to start with an introduction as for what the Association of Architects has done. And this project is supported by the Pan American Association of Architects, and as, for example, the PIC program, which is not only associated as an institution, but in the Pan American continent. And for me, it's important to mention as an institution, this has 58 years, 57 years of existence. And it's the first workers association of the country. And it's a very prestigious and recognized organization with the public institutions. There's various projects that the roots are the Association of Architects, and there's various projects and other organizations. For example, the BAQ, Bienal Pan American Organization of Architecture. It's one of the most important in this region and also in the world, not only because it has over 40 some years of existence, but there's also 3,000 people that participate in this on a daily basis. There's the ECP, which is certification of projects. This entity is important for recognizing cities with less vulnerabilities on a structural level of the buildings. And so there's also the BAQ archive collective, and there's various projects that have been done in different cities in the country and also on an international level and on the community level, which is a very interesting project on the community level, which is done presently. This association has an organization. We're going to focus on the number 2, talking about the association and the community. We also work on the formation and diffusion of information. With the Association of Architecture in the community, we always have a position of public administration with the municipalities and on a national level. And so when there's complex problems such as flooding, the association is always present and backs up the community, and they could back us up as well. And within this project, there's also the environmental project, the environmental project that we're developing, which has to do with urban vegetation and universal access to different areas. So the Association of Architects have taken the streets to work with the communities, and the municipality has supported us, and we have had various policies during the through the municipality, which have been improved and implemented, such as bicycle paths and trails. And so this always has to do with a sustainable aspect, which is always about having the presentations and applying these methods. For example, the axis of action, which we are doing in a street near the Association of Architects. And we are making a 3-lane street near the area of Quito, in Quito, where we're going to try and create more of a sustainable area around our building that could be replicated in other areas. And we have agreements with Quito, and we have an opportunity to work with the community and supported by the city of Quito. There's various professional people that are working on this, anthropologists, engineers, that are working with the Association of Architects with this continental campaign, which was started by the Pan American Association of Architects along with our initiative, with one architectural tree. So through this association, we have as a goal where we will be able to distribute trees and to different members of the association. And along with the community, there's the CIUQ, Center of Information, Urban Information of Quito, which includes architecture, landscaping, urban planning, land use planning, and the real estate area, which includes biologists, and this is related to the scientific knowledge that we are interested in applying through this project. And you may also know about our webpage. The 20th of August, we will be able to launch this project and you will be able to participate. You have an it would be very opportunistic for us to have your participation when we launch this project. And we'll be available in the time when you are to form agreements for mutual collaboration to take this project forward. And this is the development of the geo portal as different maps and the use of this land, formation of buildings and compatibility of the grounds. And so through this project, it would also be very important to have some space to show you this project as well. This is a collaborative investigation, and we have worked with the ESPE. We've also had some support from the Flaxo University and from the Catholic University, which also would like to support this project. And entering into the pilot program of reinforcement of structures, this was formed during the Forum of the City, which we have participated with. It has the Association of Architects for more than 15 years, whereas worked on various proposals. And on this occasion, we decided to do a practical project that would also be used in the reality that we're faced with. And in this association, we are living in a city that is highly vulnerable for seismic events, flooding, and we are faced with this risk. And this is how we look at it from this perspective as a working group. This is one of our areas where we work, which is in Puembo, in this picture, which is semi-rural zone outside of Quito. This is in the neighborhood Jaime Rodos. And here we are doing the first workshop in this top picture with students, teachers, and professionals in the construction field. And we've been working in Quito for 15 years on these structural issues to reinforce buildings such as the one seen here and the bottom picture, which is in the periphery of Quito, and has been built little by little, but the construction has never been built in a way that's very sustainable. And so in a more broad way, we're talking about the integral way of working with these neighborhoods so that the public policies result. The structural reinforcement is indispensable, but we're talking about improving the tectonic environment and the urban environment and improving all of that. So when we work with the communities and the different municipal officials, then everything is written down, everything that is generated through the process that was done through until with the architectural design and including the budget that will be needed for the project. It's all written into the application. So here's a municipal authority, and here's the community showing the project so that the project is part of the community. It was taken and accepted by the community. So here's a structural system using reinforcement of adobe wall. And here's somebody working with cement walls, which are very common in informal settlements that often have cinder block walls. And here is someone working in one of the houses that we did an intervention with, which did not have adequate rooms or ventilation or lighting or areas outside of the building. And so this was the constructor that we contracted so that he could be part of this initiative. His name is Patricio, and he has a lot of experience with consulting with the United Nations organization. So after the earthquake in Mexico, he was taken there to work on reinforcement of buildings. And this is why we wanted to work with him along with the Polytechnical University. And he did an investigation along with us in order to do the theoric part and then apply all of this that we had studied so that the architectural project is not just about the physical work, but it's about the knowledge of the engineers and that it's applied adequately. So the Association of Architects have also worked a lot with the media, which is indispensable. It creates credibility and a way to work with communities. So everyone here knows what we're talking about. Minga, the community collective work, which is where the community and students and academics and professionals all work together. And all of this support is important for the execution of the product. Now I'm going to share some other images. Hold on for 1 second. I don't know why I don't have it open. Just hold on for 1 second. Particularly the structural reinforcement project is very important. This was a document that was made before launching the project, and it has to do with the reinforcement facing anti-seismic structures. And so, and looking at the analysis and debate, it was also went to the territory and the application. So the principal objectives were to work with multiple actors, the public sector as well as the private sector, and to use the political will and leverage through decision making. The development of this pilot project is derived with using materials and technicians which would be developed for this pilot project, not through an integral way, working with the different neighborhoods, and it will include recommendations regarding the technical, economic, legal, social, and community part of the project. This is the poster of the project. There were 3 forums, 3 theoric forums. The first forum in 2018, there were 4 forums, and that with the seismic vulnerability, there was management of the seismic risks and risk management and international experiences and resilience. So it's important to look at some of these different quotes here. Quito has approximately 65% informal constructions, which are in insecure zones. These are this is the information that provoked this project. So how was this project formed with the different arguments needed to improve the environment or the habitat? So this is an architectonic approach to improve the space, improving the structural place, like the bathroom that's very poorly lighted, or improving a structural situation. We do an architectonic evaluation. For example, like what we had shown in the image, it was a housing that could be used also as a store or for some form of production, but it could be used for many more uses than what it was primarily built for. So Patricio Silencia was also an architect involved, and so it has to do with the buildings of 1 or 2 floors that are constructed by cinder block or cement, which is the building materials that are most used. Also, blocks of adobe can also be used, such as what is found in the historic center of Quito, which is commonly built from cinder block or bricks. And there's also cement and sand that's used, and no less than 10 millimeters of water. And there is a mesh that is used that is connected by 8 millimeters apart in the maya into the columns, and having to do with cuts that in this that can avoid the seismic damage as well. Not only is this been developed by the engineer Plasencia, but also some of the different colleagues in the Association of Architects, the different engineers who participate, and And the engineer El Salvador as well used revision of the structure to make sure that it was structurally sound. Ecuador also has two causes of earthquakes: the location of the tectonic plate of Nazca, which is has a tectonic plate below another, which as well as the deformation of the crust of land in the Andes. So it can create large catastrophes, as what happened in 2016, which I'm going to talk a little bit about in the sector Manabí and Esmeraldas in the Pacific region of Ecuador. So when we enter the phase, there's three phases, which the first is to define the procedure, the budget, and what will be needed in order to build the structure, as I had commented earlier. A strong wall that is structurally sound. This is a recreation of using Adobe, which is used with metal, which is often used in grills, which is an experimental method to reconstruct this building. There's teachers, professional laborers, and teachers as well involved in this process. In the architectonic perspective, this is a wider space than in the previous picture. And here, this has been replicated with the cementing and the covering of the building. And then in the second phase, in the reinforcement of three different housing structures, and we use the typology that's with a cornering, and which is very common, used in factories, for instance, and to have different versions of how to approach this process. Here we have the president of the community who talks with the different owners of the buildings and how we could apply this to their housing structures. And the next phase is the reinforcement of public buildings. This project doesn't want to stay just in private buildings, but also work with public buildings in parks. And what we saw is that in the schools, commonly in public schools, they do not have structural buildings that are repeated throughout the country in the same way. So if we could achieve this through this project, through restructuring buildings in an educational way, it could be replicated in other parts of the country. So this phase we have not been able to do for lack of resources, because the value of this project is not a lot, but with these hard economic times, it's making it difficult. But the municipality has to give us 50% in order to do this project. So we were not been able to finish this, but this is the third phase to make a school. So there's different packets that we have presented to the private sector. And there's been interesting proposals through the private sector talking about the different materials that are used for the project and being able to obtain them. So there's a different value here for these different packets that are available. So to finish here, I would like to show you these quotes. And this was the reason that we chose to do this project, which we think is fundamental and necessary. It has not been able to be completed through the public institutions, but in the earthquake of 2016, there were 677 deaths and a loss of over $3,300,000. And there's a lot of inefficient structures that were built without permission. Only 40% of buildings constructed have permission to be built. And so the majority are built in an informal way. There's been various earthquakes in the 20th century that have been from level 6 earthquake to level 8 on the Richter scale. And so the 75% of the 51% of the earthquakes account for the amount of money that is spent on risks. So if an earthquake happens like in 2016 in Esmeraldas and Manabí in Quito, this could be a very large disaster where we are talking from 70 to 90% of the structures are informal. So this is an urgent matter to work on this project. So the causes of vulnerability in Quito have affect the real estate in the different areas of Quito. In some neighborhoods, there is construction of existing constructions. The norms that are created for building these structures, a lot of times the families do not want to build structures because of the economic reasons. So there's also been strong seismic activity in the country, and the people do not communicate with the citizens about the reality of a strong earthquake and what would happen. Work that is has low resistance to earthquakes are very common in Quito. So in 2016, there were problems detected in illegal constructions, irregular constructions that do not correspond to the studies that have been made, constructions without technicians and without permission. And so these constructions are done on the edge of rivers, and this is where there can be heavy seismic damage. And from the lack of knowledge of the different materials used can compromise the structure of the buildings. And as a conclusion, the Association of Architects considers that this is a valuable pilot project for this generation of integral management. And so local authorities and national authorities should be involved. It needs to reform the curricular instruction of buildings in face of seismic vulnerability, and it contemplates mechanisms of participation that can be used with sustainability and replicability in the project. And to sum up, the execution of this project will permit an example of reinforcing structures of housing, of low-cost housing that could be applied in all of the territory, replicated, and could construct important relations between the state and improvement of the integrity of neighborhoods on a state and local level. So now we begin with the problem of coronavirus, which in the urban zones need to be much stronger, and avoiding the urban expansion and to live within what in the vacant land in the cities and in the properties that are already existing but need to be opportunistically modified to avoid earthquake damage. So we can improve the city for a better quality of life and without breaking the social networks that already exist in urban areas for different social groups. So this is the project of building reinforcement. If anyone has any questions, I'm gonna let Danielle facilitate that so that I could add anything that needs to be said. Thank you. Thank you, Pablo. Yes, there are definitely going to be various questions. So I motivate you to raise your hands. I just want to make a short comment first. I'm sure that all of those who are present identified a lot of similarities with what our Center of Investigation looks for, and with the same methodologies and our form of working. So being interdisciplinary and working with communities and influencing the local authorities as well. Identifying the physical vulnerabilities as well as the social vulnerabilities, which are well related, and the work is very similar. So many of those who attended this seminar, I'm sure, have appreciated that and may have questions, and now is your chance. We'll start with Maria Isabel. I think that you raised your hand first. Hello, how are you? Good morning with everyone. I have a question that's very specific. It's that if you have worked on a cost for by the square meter for projects such as, or if you work on housing structures such as the one in Roldos that are found in the periphery of Quito, if you're thinking about the people as they are, they cannot pay for the cost of this reinforcement, and they cannot access credit in order to pay for it due to their social conditions. So have you estimated a cost, and what are the lines towards those people who inhabit these neighborhoods could access this type of reinforcement of their building? Thank you, Maria Isabel. We have a budget that we can include and share with you as a document, but in general terms, there's various factors. The cost of a square meter is $25, which is very low. And so this project is to minimally intervene with structure. And the owners have done a large effort to have the layout of their home, which implies kind of working with the budget that that is their housing, which needs to be seen as kind of a patrimonial structure. And so working or changing it with a minimal amount and in the least aggressive way as well, instead of putting in a lot of columns, which would be very aggressive. But $25 per square meter would be, there would be a work that could be done with Minga collective work days, or so the construction, as I have showed you, $1,000 was about what cost it for the last one we did, and some other times up to $8,000. But that's the average for how much it could cost to do these interventions. This value is important because the Ministry of Housing, I can't remember the name because several have been, but the one before last, the minister, we presented the cost and he included it in the laws of social housing, an amount of $8,000 for restructuring houses, and it was a success. But then he took it out, and we don't know up until now why he took that out. So how could one person access that much money? It needs to be through public policies that for housing, there could be an amount such as $8,000 or $10,000 that could be allowed for restructuring a house. And as I showed in the document, it implies a neighborhood where the people are compromised or agree to do this work so that they can make a relationship between the community and the users and the municipality of Quito as well, so that we can get the budget for this. So we need all of this written down. And I forgot to mention previously through the Association of Architects that the existing buildings could get the papers they need in an easy way. So there could be regularization of the land use and the legal part of this makes it a lot easier having the papers, because then we can ask for the papers, we can calculate how much the structural changes will cost. I don't know if that answered your question. Yes, Pablo, thank you very much. I have other questions, but I'm going to let others ask questions. You can also leave the questions in the chat, and then we can send them on to Pablo. So these are colleagues, so we can continue working on this. Alfredo.
Hola, ¿sí me escuchan?
Hello, do you hear me?
Hola,
yes, Alfredo.
Pablo, un gusto saludarles.
Hello, Pablo. It's a pleasure to meet you, and thank you for the presentation. I really liked a lot the part of moving towards the next phase of the project. We are in a research and diagnostic phase, but the idea of this project is to apply this information. So this moves us forward towards the next phase of the investigation that we're making. So I come from social sciences, specifically anthropology. So the technical questions is not my field. So I have some questions and they go more in that direction. First, I would like you to explain more about the community relationship. There's been some different things that are very interesting to me about the different neighborhoods, and I would like to know how the experience of the participation of the people in the project happen, because this is very important to us from the social perspective, because exactly we are trying to, that the people are not just the users, but they are the people of their houses. And so we are constructing this through the investigation. And we would like for these transformations to be based on this. A question that I have is, you explained a lot about the reinforcement in terms of the seismic risks. We are also in this project talking about multi-hazards, the multiple hazards such as mudslides, landslides, or other types of other types of hazards. And if your project works with other hazards, not just the seismic hazards. A third comment that I have, I really like the initiative of working with the city, but what worries me is how will we develop an civil action that does not replace, but kind of works with the city, because if it doesn't, then we're not going to achieve the problems that we are proposing, or the proposals that we are working on. So how can we operate through the civil platform with the community based on the threats of the city and the hazards in the city, and not substitute the municipality, but be careful about the different roles that we are doing, because that will imply a better governed city. Thank you. These are my questions. Thank you, Alfredo. These are very interesting questions, and thank you very much. I'm going to do my best to answer, but these are complex questions. I really like that you talked about the people occupying their own house, and this was something that I thought about previously, because it's defined a lot by what we're trying to do, that each house within the community is important for the community. It's been made with a lot of effort, even if it's a house made out of cardboard or cinder blocks, whether it's vulnerable or not. The relationship with the community is very complex, and this was something that we value, and it's great that we have had a sociologist and anthropologist to have with us, because we're architects and technicians, but it helps to have, it's better to have more actors in the process. So something that we've worked on is that we do a very minute work that we've worked on slowly with the 4 forums that we've done in classrooms in the Association of Architects, where we have invited various members, including social scientists from international areas like Colombia. There was also Yepes from the Polytechnical University, to explain the dilemma to all of the people involved. And this was an interesting proposal to make it evident the big problem that we were faced with. Then work with the community and identify the neighborhood through the context that we have in the Roldos community, there was a budget, and there was a lot of interest in the community to have us work there. Even more, there were infinite projects there, at least 5 or 6 that we identified. And once we worked in the restructuring of one house, then we started work. They told us they wanted the park, the daycare center, and different places, but we were not able to approach these. So the third question, whether we're working as the Association of Architects or the Municipality of Quito. But once we entered with people of the neighborhood, it was very easy because they committed to working on this. And culturally in our country, it's important to understand that we can do this work through collective work days, and the cost of labor will be the least amount possible, and that the material will also be provided in the least expensive way possible, which makes these projects very interesting to work with. And so the finished houses is a part that I was not able to share, but we'll have to see if I can share pictures of that. So the relationship with the community is complex, but it's fundamental. And we work through different actors, not just from the technical side, but also with social scientists that can help us, sociologists that create those agreements, work on those agreements, and strengthening those relationships. Now, some of that may have been lacking a little bit, but on the side of the multiple hazards, we don't just work on seismic hazards. For instance, the Swiss operation has to do with new constructions, which is not for existing structures, for instance. And there can be other systems as well, but we're looking at the least aggressive system that the people could live in part of the house while the other part of the house is being restructured. So there's architectonic changes that are made to the structure. And so Jose Cesar Amador or another colleague could help me with what other systems could exist. There's multiple hazards, talking not just about seismic hazards, but landslides. And so they're complex, and we have to look at it through an integral approach. And if we're approaching a structural problem, that's the possibility of facing one of the dilemmas to improve all the rest of the environment. And so looking first at the structure, which is the most obvious problem, we could also improve the streets, the parks, or interiors of the house. But those are the last problems that we would face. And so through this integral process. In the third point, how to form a civil association without being a small municipality. With the Association of Architects, we have people that have worked a long time in these projects. It's a headache. It's work that moves at an ant's pace, and because of the dilemmas with public institutions, not just the problems with the mayors, but also the technicians, that the project is formed in, we might have an inductive technician and then he changes, and so what we need to is always strengthen these relations and work very closely with the municipality and tell them how things are on the ground. So this is a project that we started in 2016 in the forum in Quito, and we saw that there was an opportunity for us to do this on our own because we need to demonstrate that it could be done and that it's not so complex as they had thought it would be. So through on different levels, including the small level is us, if we're not applying a good urban space in Quito, let's demonstrate that it could be done through the Association of Architects, and then the city could be able to replicate this. So there's a order of 004 about sandy grounds and not building over a certain height. This implies a certain amount of resources in order to do this, and the municipality did not have the resources, so that we told them they need to make a bank of urban projects that could be done in various areas of the city. And once they have $300,000 or $500,000 to invest in different areas of Quito, then they will be able to choose which urban project, which has already been designed by technicians, could be built. We have done a pilot plan that the builders have money that they would like to create these structures. So this is a pilot project, and we have to look at the mechanisms in order to get support from the municipality for projects that can be done. Whether it be delegation, such as the collaborative organizations, but why did this Association of Architects choose this to do this? It does not necessarily help us economically, such as these projects, but the idea was to provide some support to the community through our technical expertise from the fields of architecture and engineering. So surely it's not, the census has not been done, but the informality of the constructions has reduced in Quito, because now these instead of being approved in 7 months, they're approved in 7 or 8 days. So this helps the architect, the designer, and the person goes to certify these buildings. And this is the hope of the association, that this will promote this. Thank you, Pablo. We also have Giuseppe.
Yes. Hello, Pablo. Thank you very much for your presentation. I wanted to try to speak Spanish, but I might have some problems with some words, so I will talk in English. I am a social scientist and I work at the University of East Anglia in the UK. I think that some of the answers you have already provided to Alfredo. However, my question.
Si quisiera traducción, translate.
Sí, tiene interpretación.
Sí.
Yes, I'm in.
¿Hay para traducir en español o no?
Pablo, sí, abajo en tu pantalla dice interpretación.
Ah, ok.
Y ahí escoges en qué idioma quieres escuchar. ¿Sí?
Ok.
Listo, entonces
Sí,
ahora.
ahí sí.
Sí.
Excuse me, Giuseppe.
Sí, no, I wanted to try Spanish, but I might not know some words, so it's better to speak English. I work in the UK, at the University of East Anglia, and I am a social scientist. And I just want to connect to the question by Alfredo, and I think you have already provided some answers to my questions. So my question is, do you have a sort of baseline methodology that you apply in your different kind of work every day? And the second, so for example, how to integrate the communities and the perceptions of the communities within your work for structural improvements. And the second question is, do you think you can there is space for improving your work with a better inclusion or with a larger inclusion of communities and other kind of stakeholders within your work of structural disaster risk reduction? Thank you.
Thank you, Giuseppe. Nice to meet you. Bueno, sí. Efectivamente, mira.
Yes, actually, we, with our work and the structural work that we have done, we have applied methodology that had to do with how to approach the community with architects and students of the Catholic University and other universities to improve these social processes. As Alfredo had mentioned, this is something for during a second phase that we would have specialized technicians or sociologists dedicated to this. We are architects that work in this, but it would be better to have professionals working on this from my perspective. And the second point, we also did a book about 400 pages talking about the methodology of how we approach the community, how the plans were approved, how isolated structures or isolated or buildings that were closer together or corner buildings as well. Once we identified this, we worked with the leaders of the community to identify 3 buildings that had documentation and papers. Then we moved on to the second process of the methodology, which was to go to the municipality and ask for permission, because we had all of the different points that we wanted to be applied during this project. It took us about 6 months after talking to the municipality and to these different individuals. And finally, they helped us to deliver these permits. And this is a structure that already existed. So we needed to get various permits in order to make a structural change, which was not contemplated before in these neighborhood projects. But we use these mechanisms to work on this restructuring project. And then doing the diagnostic work of the structure using architectonic investigation and using architects, including volunteers of the Association of Architects, so we could look at the best possible architectonic conditions for the structure. And then we proposed the project, and that's when it was a tug and pull, push and pull of the existing problems and the architectonic problems. So we had to look at what to give more value to in order to work together, like in any project. Then we started to work on the agreements with the different universities, like the Central University, the Technical University, and the Polytechnical. And this is important because it allows for the students to work on some of their academic information and apply it here in a project, so that the architects could also be in the neighborhood and work with community architects, which were architects that would go and work specifically with the community. And through this process, we got a budget, we worked on the construction, and then we got the conclusions for the main points of the methodology that began in the beginning and ended with the final results. And so it can define the method of work and the different professional aspects in the first phase and throughout the whole process, including the social part, including the community, which from the technical side, we know that the users of these homes have good perspective on where they want to live, but the base of this could be improved, not just with technicians, but with professionals that can look at the integral approach of the neighborhood and to see that a tree in front of the house is just as important as improving the structure itself or putting a column. So if they could see it from a more integral approach, it's important to see how we can improve this methodology, including the technical side, combining these different parts like the engineering perspective, which could improve the vulnerabilities, but we have to do it house by house in a community, as Alfredo had said. We can't just apply this in a place where there's a lot of risk and hazards, and there's a lot of technology, because in the coast, you may have to work with bamboo or a different building material, and you're also thinking about the environmental situation there. So it's going to vary depending on where we work.
Me gusta mucho esa perspectiva integrada con ciencias sociales, ciencia física. Gracias, gracias.
Gracias. Tenemos todavía unos minutitos para una última pregunta.
We have a few minutes for a last question.
Pablo, a todos los colegas de arquitectos. Hay un pedido
There's a request if you could share this document with us so that we could read it. There's a lot of interest in this document, so I imagine that you could contact us to share that document. Now, Ellie, are you there? Hello. I just would also like to mention that there are some questions from Liz Holcomb on, maybe we can take this. I don't know if Danielle, you would like to take that question? I have not finished yet, so thank you very much for presenting your projects, which I think that we can learn a lot from you and collaborate on this project. I have several questions. First, how this competition of the different plans was passed on you, and how the people have been able to evaluate the effect, how effective the results of this project have been. or if this is a separate vision. And also talking about the pilot project, that we're talking about these case studies and how they influence the city. How have you thought about using these pilot studies to see how to impact the entire city? Thank you, Elise. The SMP now has 8 years that it has been working, and as many as each architectonic project has its own DNA, its own quantity of information, and the information doesn't stay with us or with the municipality. It's made public for the community, whether it be ground use studies or the different information. So actually, there's a lot of projects that have been done in Quito. It was a competition that the municipality did. And so there's one that's been done for 8 years and another that's been done for 3 years. So we do not have data of the ENEC, which will come out in the following year, which will answer a question that will hopefully be included in the census. So, but it was because of the pandemic, it's been postponed a little bit. But the reinforcement of structures and housing, we're going to look at how many projects have been approved. It's a question of different perception, and it has gone down because people have chosen, because as an individual, a professional, or an architect, if you know that the architect or the professional is doing the work well, that's an important part. It's not about it being approved. For instance, Jose Salvador is one of the engineers of the collaborative group, and it implies the law of the structures, which is from 2016, after the earthquake in Manabí. Your project could be outside of these norms and outside of the urban policies. So what we would like to do, it's not an obligation, but something that we would like to do, is make analyses of the dilemmas of the architecture and the structures. So we know that things could be improved, but we can go to the municipality and say what is wrong and that we can change it. We're not talking just about structural architecture. We're talking about urban areas where the existing maintenance of areas, whether it has to do with patrimony or other reasons, is not being done. So 6 months ago, we were working on these regulations because the Association of Architects was trying to change these regulations on the level throughout Quito, because we know that the people are not adequately applying, whether it be the tree or the structure or the park. If we can cover our eyes and let this happen because it's been approved, but our political position is that if it's wrong, it needs to be changed. And so we have realized that. And so, excuse me, but it's important to understand why we want to have the SP, and And hopefully after the census, we'll have the data and we'll be able to see how much it has reduced the informal structures but our interest is with having official data for this.
Ok, antes de, vamos a hacer las preguntas juntos, Marco. Primero voy a empezar yo a
We're going to do the questions
traducir
together.
preguntas un poquito
I'm going to try and ask these questions quickly.
un poco técnicas y tal vez,
There's two technical questions
ingeniería civil, pero igual
which are more focused on civil engineering,
tal vez nos
but you may have this information, but if not, you may give us a resource.
forma estándar de
If
identificar
there is some standard way to identify the different types of buildings in Quito,
y cómo saber si es que esto
and how do you know if this is something that could be adapted to the existing classifications of buildings? And the second is whether there's a standard way to estimate the size of these buildings that are being constructed in the city. Marco, you could also ask your question. Thank you, Pablo, for the seminar. It's been interesting to understand this firsthand, how this pilot project works, from the different perspectives that are opened through these politics of reinforcing structures and improving these buildings. So this is a question that I constantly have here in the center of Quito. We can project a resilient city in the future that's sustainable and incorporates the different risks involved with the planning in the area. But it's always 60 or 70% of constructions that are informal. And that is where it's very important, this idea of converting and reinforcing, not just reinforcing, but in risk management, the transversal process of urban rehabilitation or reurbanization, where the physical aspect or aesthetic aspect can be restructured in these buildings, and studies of different urban areas and the different hazards that exist. So it's very interesting to me that this possibility of constructing this type of policies that as much with the local governments as the communities in these processes to see the different options that in the future on a medium or large term can be constructed. Okay, so with Elise and Jose, maybe you could support me on these questions about the structures. Definitely, Marco, this is something that's been worked on. We have some different numbers in our head, and that not just in Ecuador, but in all of the region in the south of the different Andean countries, the informal constructions and the percentages of informal constructions, 60 to 70%. Definitely, it's a political situation as far as what gets done. So there's many politicians who have this is not interested them because it affects the votes that they get. So these technical proposals are not interesting to the local governments. And in these neighborhoods, these are the neighborhoods where there's less support of the government. And so to talk about avoiding these risks, it's very important to convert the culture that we have into policies that from the base of the architectural association, we're talking about the environment where we live. Every day there are different risks, but what happens when there are no R events? For example, when we're talking about a seismic country, it has, or we're talking about a fault line, well, it's not talked about all the time. So it's fundamental to take into consideration these aspects of the culture, which from the universities and the workers' associations to look at these analyses in order to change or alter a space, because it's fundamental. And thank you to COVID, unfortunately, but thank you to COVID, there have been new theories that about what had already existed about how to build new cities and change cities to have places for immediate attention and movement throughout the cities. These are really important for these different neighborhoods. And so it allows us to generate risk management in these neighborhoods. For instance, Quito Tennis and the Fiscal and other neighborhoods, including the south of Quito, like Jaime Roldos or Velasco, different suburban areas that have resolved their infrastructure that has just been made over time through working class neighborhoods with the public transportation and the health infrastructure as well. So we're talking about talking with the local government and the federal government about how these neighborhoods can be more livable and how there can be protection for different genders and for children as well, to create a safe space. So this is an integral work that has to be done from the base, and to reinforce structures is necessary, but we also have to talk about doing these things good from the beginning, which the workers' associations need to support these public institutions. And with this other question with Elise, whether there's standardized ways of assessing the buildings, but since we are in Ecuador, we have different regions with different climates, and the structures are going to be distinct. So from the beginning, this makes the standardization complex. From the coast to the Sierra, this makes the architectonics different. And in the zone of Quito, it's mostly been done with steel, cement, and adobe, which these have been used in informal neighborhoods, because seeing it from the architectural perspective, it's not the best way to construct with cement and steel, but they're very dangerous, and it would be much better in a more conventional way. But this is the precarious nature of these structures. And as far as the weights, how could we talk about this, asking Jose as an engineer? Hello, thank you, Pablo. As you had shared earlier, the majority of these buildings are cement. So if we're talking about what is informal, if 30 or 40% is formal, 80% of the buildings are done with cement, And then there's very few buildings that are made out of alternative materials. So if we're talking about weight, as Pablo had mentioned, so we have a cement structure which could be 750 or 800 kilograms, but with steel it could be so when we're talking about the vulnerabilities, when there's a very heavy building, there's more risk. So so there's more faults that can cause a collapse of a building. So in the Sierra and Quito, the construction systems are based on anti-technical studies with skeletal buildings. The blocks and are not well made and not following the technical advice. The elements, for example, if we talk of a column that's well designed and it doesn't have the structural part. So we do have a database that we can take weights that are equivalent, and that could be used to explain that part. Thank you.
Thank you.
And to complement that, here we have Liz. Hello. So in the Ecuadorian norm, which is the NEC, which is the compendium of all of the regulations over construction. So officially, the source or reference that whether a private engineer or someone from the Association of Architects has to work with the NEC, which is all of the legal framework as far as the regulations for block building, cinder block building, steel building, a wood building. So that refers to what Pablo was saying, as well as Jose. The standard is the kilograms per square meter. So that was what Jose was describing as far as the weights. There's another point that's really important for Quito is the norm of land use. And so it requires the reduction of the weight of the building to not have the problems during an earthquake. So there is a little more information there that's a little more focused on the weight of the building and the weight related to the seismic event. So that will help to have a standard. And on the third part, with the S&P, which has real data of what actually is happening to have diagnostic information, is the information that the SAP has, which can be shared. I would also like to say one more thing about the question of Elise. From my position of the president of the Association of Architects, which is kind of a political position, with the standardization, we have to be very careful. I know the question of Elise doesn't go in that direction, but the actual government of Lenin Moreno offered making 3,000 buildings, but he hasn't even arrived. He hasn't arrived to 10,000 buildings yet. But the standardized process of having the buildings constructed all over the country. There's various regions, various climate zones, and different cultures which exist because of the climate. So it's very complex and you have to really think carefully about what is proposed to the Ministry of Housing and to make different competitions of architecture and to look at the different structures in order to plan out the different housing in different regions of the country. So it's not the same to work on housing in Quito as in Pujilí, which is different area in the Andes. And there's a different social system, different climate, like in Esmeraldas with much warmer temperatures. So the classification of the architecture has to be different for these different areas and has to protect the building from the climate more than others, whether it be the wind or the climate. So it would be interesting to do another seminar to talk about this, and if we could work together to generate these methodologies in order to identify how to make an adequate housing in a certain part of the country, and instead of letting the government do this. This is an interesting policy that we could work on together, which is not reinforcing structures, but more on the design side. Thank you very much, Pablo, Mariano, and Jose, and Paulina. Thank you to everybody. I think we are convinced that we're talking with the same language as the Association of Architects. And so this gives us a lot of satisfaction, at least to be able to work together in the future and have some results that are interesting for the city and for the country. Thank you then. Just like to remind you that from this week and for 6 weeks, there will be a series of seminars from Edinburgh. I don't know if you received this calendar, but I'm going to ask Adriana to redistribute this calendar so that these seminars will be based on physical sciences for now, but after we have talked about this during these seminars, we continue working this and looking at what exactly is our science and what we're working on. So this will make us take advantage of this. So we're gonna pause on these seminars here in Quito and see how well we did and begin to plan a second series, which will begin in the month of September. So we're not going to burden ourselves with all of these seminars that are going on. So in the next weeks, it may be interesting to invite the Association of Architects to the seminars that we're going to have in the hub on Thursdays. And these seminars are organized in Edinburgh, and they're going to talk about multi-hazards, citizen science. They're not going to cover volcanoes, but they're going to cover earthquakes, landslides, seismic vulnerabilities, and people from different countries are going to be participating from different countries that work with us in the center. So that is interesting. So that's why we're going to pause with our seminars. So although Pablo spoke exactly for 30 minutes, and so then we were able to go for 1 hour exactly. So usually we go over a little bit of time, but that's good to take advantage of this. So are these seminars open to the public, or are they close. I think they're open and you need to register, but they're open. But we can we can come to an agreement. So if they're members of your project, then there wouldn't be a problem. I do consider myself a member of the project, so if it's open, we could share these seminars with the network of the Association of Architects in Twitter and different social networking on the web. So if it's open, we can do that. I would have to ask, how open can these seminars be? I think they can be really open because the capacity that Edinburgh has is very broad. So initially, the members of the project will be the ones who are involved, talking about different topics that we're not all specialized in. So we're going to share this information, and we hope that you can make it Thursday and hope that we can have again on Mondays for the seminars, and motivate yourselves to participate. And thank you everyone for your time, and I hope everyone is well and healthy. Take care of yourself very well. I want to share one last thing. I was not in the last meeting, but I would like for you to come to some understanding about the souk and the launching of this project. So we had talked with Felipe and Adriana about the intentions of this project to initiate this process. So now if you would like to begin to work on this topic, then I could talk about that. And I'll thank you very much for your attention. Thank you again. That was missing too. The Association of Architects has a information platform that's very interesting. They're going to present in the next days, so we could attend that presentation and see on all the different ways that we could collaborate. So and have, all right. Thank you everyone, and take care of yourself, and we will be in contact. Okay, farewell to everyone.
Daniel, antes de olvidarme, tú dijiste a ver si se podía compartir la información. Voy a consultar al foro de la ciudad porque como hay una comisión del foro.
I'm going to talk with the forum of the city in order to share this information if I can, and in order to access that information. Thank you, Pablo.